Well, good afternoon. How's everyone doing? Well, it's certainly beautiful. I drove up today from DC and had an opportunity to see all of the beautiful trees. Really excited to be back in Maryland where my mom used to live. She recently just moved. But I want to talk to you guys today about really breaking barriers and how I built a technology company, not as someone who had a background in technology, but as someone who really wanted to solve a true problem. And so to tell you a bit more, I want to take you guys back to the summer of 2015. It was the month of July, and it actually is the day that I say I saw the light. I was sitting in my best friend from college, my college roommate's kitchen, and we're catching up. Ironically, we were having this very jovial conversation about social media and how we were so grateful that it really wasn't around when we were in college because our hair was terrible, our outfits are terrible, we just have no proof. And so we had this fun conversation, and we're laughing, and we're like, oh, social media is destroying the world. Like, we escaped, and we had a real life, and we got to enjoy, going out without our cell phones. And so we're having this tech conversation, and she offers me a glass of water. And when she opened her refrigerator door, I could immediately see from the front to the back. And when she turned around, she stood there, and she looked at me, and she's pregnant with her second child, and she burst into tears. And she says, Jasmine, I know what you're thinking. I'm always trying to keep meals and apple juice and goldfish in the house for Max, who was her 3-year-old son at the time, but we're struggling. And I always say I don't know what my face looked like in that moment that evoked tears from her. But the reason why I look at that day as the day that I saw the light is if you're like me, I am a new mom. This is actually my second time in heels since having a baby. But during that pregnancy, I was addicted to cheese and Simply Lemonade. And I would go downstairs in the dead of the night, and I could open my refrigerator door, and its bright white light let me see everything so perfectly clear, and I could see throughout my refrigerator and get what I wanted. And so when I looked in the refrigerator of my friend, who's college educated, who had formerly worked on sets like Good Morning America, she had traveled the world with Paula Abdul, Alicia Keys, and Zendaya. She's a creative artist, and she doesn't have food in her refrigerator. I think about that day, and that's really what got me started in this realm. And what's so unique about that is that her story is like that of 47 million people across this country who nationwide tonight are going to go to bed hungry, wake up tomorrow morning not knowing when and where their next meal is coming from. And every month they have to make critical decisions. They're choosing between paying for their bills, like their rent and their utilities, and paying for food. And what we know is that food is the first to go. And what was so unique about that is that her face was not traditionally the face of hunger, I would say. She was married, as I mentioned. She had a successful career. She was college educated. So she has all these things that you would think, hey, she has it perfectly made. But let me tell you what happened. They grew up in New York, in Harlem, New York. They lived on the 36th floor. And when she had her son, they were living in Harlem for about 2 years into his life. And her husband got a job at State Farm, and they decided to move down south. And what she said is, I want the American dream. I want to be able to see my son get on a school bus to school. Growing up in Harlem, she had walked to school every day of her life, always walking over snow, taking the trains. She wanted her son to ride a school bus to school and have a backyard to play in. And you all know, like we all do, it's not easy, and it's certainly not cheap to buy a house. So when you go after that dream and you move from New York City and you pack up your family's house and you pay your down payment and you get in, now you really are trying to survive, and that's what happened to her. But what was so peculiar about that moment is that I had myself invested in the fight against hunger at that time for over 7 years. I had an initiative called Sunday Soul ATL, which I'll show you guys right here. And I was feeding people that were experiencing food insecurity in the form of a pop-up restaurant. And I was renting tables and chairs and linens and printing out menus and allowing people that were living unhoused to actually dine with dignity. And for years, she came out and volunteered with me. And I tell you all that for one reason. Just like me, someone that you know, maybe now or maybe in a past life, is probably experiencing hunger because it affects 1 in 6 people on this planet. But at the same time, we waste 78 billion pounds of perfectly good food every year. In the United States, this equates to $218 billion that we spend on food we never eat. In other words, 2% of all US GDP down the drain. And so that story really is what propelled, and this video is what got me started. 4 years into feeding people on the streets, this 15-second clip, this is the exact video right here. This is before Instagram allowed for videos to be more than a minute long. I think now you can do up to 20 minutes, but no one ever watches them. But you can do up to 20 minutes. But this 15-second video goes viral. I wake up one morning on Facebook. Very scary. I think a lot of people think going viral is pretty cool, but I thought, what was going on? I thought my whole computer and everything was crashing. And I'm reading through all these comments. I went on the Harry Connick Jr. show. I went on all these talk shows and news stories. And I'm talking about why I wanted to do this, why I wanted to feed people differently. And the crust of it really became the fact that people who experience food insecurity in this country are often treated without the dignity that we all deserve. And what we believe we need and how we want to be treated often doesn't make it that way on the other side of the plate. The reason why I got started doing this is I had volunteered with an organization called #LunchBag. We had made 1,500 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And one day I walked down the street and I was passing them out, and a man says to me, "What is it?" And I said, "Oh, it's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich." And he's like, "Oh, I'm allergic. Like, that'll kill me." And I thought to myself, wow, we just made 1,500 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to pass out in the streets. And nuts are one of the #1 allergies in this country. So how do we forget about that? How do we just assume that because someone is going through a struggle, they just have to take whatever they get? And that's what I wanted to change. And so one night, I go to Facebook, and I'm reading through all these comments. God bless you. This is so amazing. This is so incredible. Thank you for doing this. But the #1 reoccurring question that people kept asking me was, who donated the food? And the truth was nobody. I was couponing. I was price matching. I was cooking all this food myself. Anywhere from 300 to 500 people I was feeding every week. I had about 40 volunteers that would help me do it. I would start the shopping on Tuesday, looking at the sales. I would begin going all over town, price matching. I always say, if you're someone who used to price match, I'm the reason Walmart doesn't do it anymore. So I used to go into Walmart with all the circulars, and I would price match everything. This is definitely when food was a lot more affordable, but I would take about $500. I got really good at making pasta and chicken, I'll tell you that, but I could figure out ways to stretch. And this green picture right here is actually my menu, so you can see how many different items I was serving. So when people asked me who donated the food, and I knew nobody, I went to Google fully expecting that I was going to figure out how to get food donated. And I put in Google, what happens to extra food at the end of the night from businesses? And instead of this nifty list that I thought would pop up that would tell me all the restaurants and businesses I can go to get food donated, instead I fell into a deep rabbit hole about food waste. And I learned those statistics I just shared with you guys. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, how does all this perfectly good food go to waste while so many people are going hungry? But I want you all to think about it like I did at that moment. And we've all seen it, right? We've been to a gala and there's empty tables and there's salads on every table. You have to know that there's food in the back that was going to serve those same people. You've been to a wedding. You've been to a corporate event. You went on vacation and had a buffet at breakfast and thought, wow, there's a lot of food left over and breakfast ends in 10 minutes. Well, all that food goes to waste. And so I'm thinking like, this has to be something to be changed. And I started spending a lot of time asking businesses, why don't you donate your excess food? Why are you guys throwing it away? And I went to 100 different restaurants, 100 different events. Everywhere I went, I asked that question, what do you guys do with your excess food? And everyone said the same thing. Well, we have to throw it away. Sometimes I want to give it away, but we would get sued and we're afraid of liability and we have no one to pick it up. And when we close, we've got to get rid of it. So I listened to all of those essentially excuses. I laughed at one restaurant told me they were sued in the 90s because they gave the food to somebody and they got sick, and the restaurant opened in like 2012. So they were totally not sued in the 90s. They didn't even exist. But there were these fables and these myths of like, hey, we would get in trouble. So I started doing a little bit of research. I learned that in 1995, under President Bill Clinton, the Good Samaritan Act had passed that said in clear black and white writing, no business would be held liable for donating food in good faith. So that wasn't enough. I then started to think, how can I get these businesses to do it? How would I make it easy for them? And what was the underbelly of it all is that I realized that hunger is not an issue of scarcity. We are wasting 40% of all the food that we produce. I saw that hunger was a matter of logistics, and I decided to create a technology company that would solve it. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not a technical founder. You can see my drawings, very, very terrible, but I started drawing what this would look like. What it would look like to be able to create an app, create technology that would solve real problems. At the time, my sister hates when I tell this, but she had just met her fiance online, and I said to myself, clearly, if we're meeting our husbands and wives online, we've got to be able to use technology to solve some real problems. And so I started hanging out at Georgia Tech, looking very weird, honestly, as a older person hanging out at the computer science building and asking to meet with students that could potentially help me build this technology. I entered into a hackathon, and after about 4 months, a clickable prototype was born. And I used that clickable prototype all of 2017 to go and talk to as many people as I could to help them get on board with doing Gooder. It would take me almost a year and a half, over 218 pitch meetings, to get one investor to tell me yes and become the 30th Black woman ever in this country to raise $1 million to build Gooder. And it took a lot of work. It wasn't an easy journey. I pitched, I got in pitch competitions, I overcame my fear of public speaking. You guys are probably thinking, what are you doing on stage if you're afraid to speak in public? But the truth was I was very afraid. I was always so fearful of my voice. I was teased about my voice when I was a child, and I was doing something that people thought was crazy because so many people, friends and family included, said, oh, this will never work. This won't work. You're not going to be able to do this. People have thought about this before. And I often say, if I had $1 for everybody that has messaged me or emailed me and said, hey, I had this idea and you're doing it, I probably would be a multimillionaire. Because the thing about it is it's less about the ideas and it's more about the execution. And it was about me going out to that college and looking kind of crazy and standing around and trying to meet professors, learning about hackathons, learning a lot of technology vocabulary that I never knew. I laugh, and I'll tell you all a story. When I entered the hackathon, they said, we're going to build an MVP. And I am a sports fan, and I thought, oh, that's going to be me. I knew nothing about like most minimum viable product. I had to go and teach myself so much along this journey. But it was important to me to do what you guys are here to celebrate today, to break barriers. And why is this important? Because today, Gooder has now provided over 40 million meals to people in need. We've kept out over 25 million pounds of materials from landfill. And whether you all know it or not, that is creating a better environment for each and every one of you. We're living through something that is truly real right now, and that is climate change, and there's no denying it. I spent the last 2 weeks down in Augusta, Georgia, and Asheville, North Carolina, providing relief to people that have been affected by the hurricanes. And I will tell you all, as I sit on the board of Project Drawdown, the number 2 thing that they say we could be doing to combat global climate change is actually reducing food waste after fixing our energy grid. This is a real big problem. But beyond that, there's a tangible benefit to it. So who do we work with? Our customers are large-scale enterprise businesses. So we work with everybody from Delta Airlines to the Atlanta Airport to the Colorado Rockies Field Stadium. We help them in a very seamless manner. We make it easy. The reality was when I created this company, I realized that this wasn't newfound spend. You know why? Because businesses spend millions upon millions of dollars every year to pay to throw their food away. They're already paying a waste management company, WM, Republic Services, whomever you use. So the food is already being paid to be thrown away. But I was able to create a better solution for them. And how I would get those first customers is I would go on their websites and it would say very clear in writing, hey, we're going to cut food waste in half by 50%. Over $4 million was spent on ads for Super Bowl in 2023 by companies like Google and Amazon, talking and telling you all how much they were going to invest in climate change. Amazon said that by 2025, which if I checked is about less than 3 months away, all of their delivery vehicles would be electric. How often do we hear the advertisement, and how few times do we follow up on that promise? And you guys, that's a fact. You can go back and look at that Super Bowl commercial, and it is out there. And I started talking to these companies about really operating on their promise. If you're going to cut food waste in half by 2025, when are you going to get started? It's 2024. If you're going to help us get to the Sustainable Development Goals of 2030, we've got to get started. We're 5 years away, and we're only 11% of the goal. You guys know that? That's very far away. We're 5 years from 2030. We created these UN sustainability goals years ago, and we've only reached 11%. So there's so much more work to be done. I wanted to create a very easy user experience. The biggest concern that businesses kept telling me is that they didn't want to pay for additional labor costs. So I knew that. I knew that I had to make this a very fast experience. How could they go from throwing this away in the trash can to having it packed up, picked up, and delivered to a nonprofit in need. Our average delivery time is about 30 minutes. We actually track that. It's actually quicker than how fast you and I will get our food if we order from Uber Eats or DoorDash today. Because the food is already prepared. So when the pickup is done, it's ready to be picked up at that very moment. Our driver picks it up. It gets delivered to a local nonprofit, usually within about a 5 to 10 mile radius of where that business exists. Once the nonprofit receives it, the driver takes a picture, the nonprofit signs for it like they would a UPS package, and that signature auto-generates a donation letter into our client's portal. And so now they have a record of every day that they requested a pickup and they donated something, what it is that they donated, good or inventories, everything it is that they sell. We integrate with US Foods, Cisco, all the big food distributor companies, and we track for them the tax value of those items at time of donation, as well as the weight of the items that they're keeping out of landfill, helping them be able to measure their waste in a way that they never have before. We're helping these businesses save money, but also do something good, or as we say, do gooder. They are helping people in their communities eat. They're keeping food out of landfills, and we've been a growing business to do it. What I want to talk to you all about today is just the audacity to believe that you could do something that could be helpful for other people. And I live in this every single day. A lot of times people ask me, well, Jasmine, how do you keep on going? I know it's so hard. And it is. It's not easy. It's not easy to build technology. It's not easy. It's not cheap either. It's pretty expensive. So you got to raise capital to do it. You got to spend a lot of time. There's a lot of iterations. But what makes me so happy is that I can go to bed every single night saying that people were hungry and I fed them. And I wake up every single morning with that same ability and that same drive to see more and more people not have to suffer like my friend who did everything right, but just sometimes couldn't make the ends meet. Most recently, in September of 2024, the latest USDA report came out on food insecurity in this country. And unfortunately, the numbers are not good. Now, 40% of all single parent households are food insecure. So almost a 10% increase. Food is going up. Costs are definitely increasing, and so many more people are struggling. And so I never take a stage without encouraging all of you is the next time that you go somewhere and you see food being wasted, whether it's Gooder, whether it's a gleaning organization in your community, it's a nonprofit organization, we've got to get this food out of landfill. It is imperative. As this food sits, it gradually rots, it produces harmful methane gas. It's a leading contributor, as I've said before, to global climate change, and it is creating a catastrophe for all of us. And it's something that we've got to think about. There is no conversation about circular economy without making sure that things don't go in landfill. You can't even begin to have this conversation. Food is the number one. It's the number one thing that sits in landfills today. So 27% of everything in our landfills is food. There's a big opportunity here, not just for what we've built at Gooder, there's a big opportunity for the world here. I want to talk to you about where we've been since. So I started Gooder in 2017. I spent that entire first year and a half trying to pitch the company, trying to raise capital, trying to get technology built. As I mentioned earlier, there was a lot that I had to learn about technology, and I remember thinking I was going to build this app like I would build a website. Boy, was I wrong. I knew nothing about servers, about engineers, how much they cost, how competitive it was going to be to get them to join the team. So a lot went into that. We started working with those large-scale businesses that I mentioned to you, and then we got hit with the pandemic. And so in 2020, we had almost reached $1 million in revenue, and every company that we were working with gave us stop works because they were closing their doors. There was no kitchen. Nobody was going to be working. There was going to be no food. And I started to think, well, how are we going to survive? How are we going to make it the next, 30 days? And I think that we all remember thinking that we would just be quarantined for about 2 weeks. I remember thinking, 14 days, we could do this. But it went a lot further. Our first customer after this pandemic started happened to actually be the Atlanta Public School District. And I got a call from the superintendent of schools, and she says to me, Jasmine, we have 55,000 students here. We just made breakfast and lunch free for all of the children, and now they have to learn virtually. We have no idea how we're going to get them their food. So our first contract that we had to kind of reverse engineer our technology to go from picking up excess food with the purpose of getting it to nonprofits. We then began to pick up prepared food with the purpose of getting it to people in need, still in the same realm. But we were delivering upwards of 55,000 meals a week to students so that they could still get access to the meals that they needed to learn at home. We then began doing something similar for senior citizens. We delivered up to about 5,500 seniors every single week we were serving. So it's really how we kept ourselves alive, and we created a new portion of our company, which was called our Hunger Solutions. Our mission is feed more, waste less, and I explained to you the food waste side, and the Hunger Solutions is really about creating sustainable solutions to address hunger in cities. We build free grocery stores inside of schools and inside of senior homes. To date, we've built over 28. We bring food directly into communities. We introduce organics recycling into our fold. When we got back into the office, I would say, we came to businesses and said, hey, we want to stand equally on that we will be for people and for planet. And while we've been taking all your edible food for the past 2 years, what are you doing with your non-edible food? We started taking this to cattle farms, hog farms, and still rolling all that data back up in our platform to be able to tell our clients, this is what's going to donation, this is what's going to people in need, this is what's getting recycled, this is what your total folio looks like. And as I said, it's been amazing. We've been featured in so many different magazines and television shows and all these other things, but what's the most important is that people like my friend, less and less, are having to make that critical decision because they know that Gooder will be there. Every time someone interacts with Gooder on a personal level, we're providing them 7 to 10 days worth of food. We're gleaning all of that impact data back. We work really closely with municipalities, so cities, states, school districts, to make sure that people in their communities eat. And it's really all at the underbelly of technology. So it hasn't been easy. It has 100% been a journey that I will always cherish, and I always tell people at the end of my life, I will be able to stand and say, hey, people were hungry and I fed them. And that's what really drives me. I want to talk to you guys more. I hope we have a lot of questions. I'm going to invite Adam back on the stage, and we are going to turn it over to a fireside chat. I just want to thank you guys for your time. And as I always say, with Gooder, hunger has met a formidable challenger, and we believe we have helped hunger meet its match. So thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. I think another round of applause for Jasmine here. This is amazing work that she's doing. Hey.
Thank you, Adam.
All right. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to sit up here and speak with you today. I think it's probably safe to say that a lot of the audience here wondering what kind of challenges you might have faced as a young entrepreneur, and maybe what kind of advice you might be able to give others in your position.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think there were a lot of challenges in there. The challenges were seasonal, right? Early on, the challenge was getting people to believe that this could be. It was very much like, I don't think this is a problem. People don't believe food waste is an issue. They don't believe in climate change. And so I had to sometimes change my pitch, depending on who I was talking to. Sometimes it was, hey, this is a climate issue. This is all about sustainability. We need to change this. Sometimes it was a, hey, you're throwing away money, and we have built technology that can help you recapture that money and be able to justify how you're getting tax deductions for your food waste. And in other times, it was very much a, don't you want to help people eat in your community, in your city? So depending on who I was talking to, it was sometimes a challenge to sell. It's certainly a challenge to fundraise for women, not just me as a woman of color. For women in general, women get less than 2% of funding. That number went down drastically in 2022 and 2023, with the number for women of color being less than 1%, actually 0.006%. So very hard to figure out, okay, well, how am I going to fund this business? And it could be challenging. I mean, there were so many companies in the early days of building Gooder. I remember, you guys remember NFTs? I remember meeting with investors that were like, oh, we're only investing in the metaverse. We're only doing NFTs. And now I'm kind of like, where are all those apes people paid like millions of dollars for? Like, where are, I haven't seen an ape in anyone's like photo anymore, like the hedge. I mean, like, but it was such a big thing. I lived through the blockchain bubble. Then it's, the blockchain, crypto. Now it's all AI. So getting through different bubbles has been a little bit of a challenge. Finding team members is always sometimes a challenge too. Specifically for me, it was the ability to not be able to compete with the Googles and the Microsofts of the world that, give you a free gym membership, let you sleep there, feed you, give you all the things. And I was kind of just getting started. So it was sometimes about being scrappy, finding people that maybe didn't go to Georgia Tech to be a computer scientist, but maybe they went into a coding boot camp. Maybe they learned to code back in the day on MySpace and created an affinity and a love for it. So being open to bringing on people in non-traditional ways and creating more opportunities. But I would say those are some of those early challenges.
Interesting. You mentioned this is, the different bubbles, right, that tech has gone through, right, certain waves, and we are living through one, arguably, with artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So,
I think with artificial intelligence, what I will say, Adam, from the bubbles, with the NFTs, I was like, this isn't going to last. I felt that pretty strongly. I hoped for it. I don't know if I felt so strongly about it, but it was interesting I think with artificial intelligence, because Gooder is building it into a lot of our platforms right now, and how I've been able to use it. I think it's probably here to stay a little bit more than how I felt about specifically like the Web3, the metaverse, and things of that nature. But the bubbles are different. And then sometimes it was a challenge to see, I don't know if you guys remember Clubhouse and like Quibi, and like they were raising like $100 million, $120 million, and where are they now? And so there was a lot of that too. I think by God's grace, for certain, I'm grateful that we've been able to raise capital, specifically as a woman and as a Black woman. It's not easy. And so when I was able to even raise $1 million, it was a big accomplishment for me, for certain. As I went on to raise more capital, that was always an accomplishment. But the biggest thing I always focused on was customers. I knew that was the best source of revenue. And when the fundraising became such a challenge and it was talked about, it almost was like I didn't want to do it. So I really drove down on like, how do I grow this company through customer acquisition? What does that look like? Who are the customers that I'm selling to? And really mapping all of that out. And I will tell you that your customer changes. As I mentioned, a new mom. I've been married now for 3 years. And I remember when I was in premarital counseling with my husband, our counselor said, your love languages will change as you have children, as you grow. And I believe in that, and that's true. But I will tell you, your customers change. Life changes. You can have someone today that cares nothing about sustainability, and tomorrow maybe they had a family member that was affected by the hurricane, and now they call you and say, hey, I really do want to do something with our food waste. And so being able to adapt to your customers, meet them where they are, show them how this works for them, and help them find the money to spend with you is always a big one too.
Well, is that part of what you feel makes your business model so successful, right? The fact that hunger's here. Unfortunately, it's a fact of life.
Yeah, and so is food waste. I think it's I always tell people we have two problems that can solve each other. There shouldn't be a world in which we have 80 billion pounds of food almost that goes to waste, 1 in 6 children going hungry. It just doesn't make sense. There has to be a way to do a lot more matching. If I had to really think about why the business has been successful to date, and of course I want it to be more successful, I told you, I was like, listen, we need to be in Maryland, we need to be everywhere. We're operating right now in 15 states, 26 different markets. That is where we essentially have customers on a daily basis, reporting pickups. Some of our largest contracts, our multi-million-dollar contracts are big locations where we're picking up 2, 3, 4 times a day, college campuses, big food distributor companies. So we do a lot of work. I think what has made it work more than anything is just being able to deliver on your word, to do what you say you're going to do, and also continue to innovate. So where our platform and technology is today is worlds away from where it was in 2018. And you listen to the customers and then you start to build with them.
That's a great point. As you're kind of working on multiple missions here, right? You're building a platform that's intuitive for your users and your customer base, but you also have, the mission of helping to eliminate hunger and food waste. So how do you incorporate that into something like a product roadmap, right? How do you develop and innovate based on that?
Yeah, and I think, our product roadmap is so extensive. So a lot of times when I'm thinking about why I need to fundraise and how we do more integrations, I'll give you a prime example. When I was first building Gooder, I thought we would have our own kind of fleet of drivers. We would be like a Uber or a Lyft. And so I spent a lot of time on Facebook groups for like Lyft drivers Atlanta, Uber drivers Atlanta, which were very funny groups because all they were doing was complaining about Lyft and Uber. And it was perfect because I was like, you guys should come and drive for Gooder. I got the very first insurance quote. Oh yeah, I mean, it was really crazy because at the time, Uber and Lyft were maybe 2 to 3 years old when I was first thinking about this. Maybe, I think Uber really started to peak around 2013, so 3 to 4 years old. And there were problems early on in their businesses, right? And so the technology was great, but the insurance applications of it were really something that I couldn't afford as a startup. So one of the things I started thinking about is how can I get Uber and Lyft to, how can I use this shared economy that's already operating to work for Gooder? So early on, the product roadmap included building a lot of API integrations. How can I integrate with their technology to where one of their drivers that's driving right past where this food is coming from can pick it up? And so that was something that we built in. We built blockchain into our platform early on. I was intrigued. It was definitely a bubble, but I was intrigued about it. And what was really unique for us is the chain of custody. It's so important because we see a lot of food recalls. We need to know where food ends at every single point of us touching it. And so having that chain of custody that things can't be changed. For example, no one can go back into our portal on a day that they donated 100 pizzas and change that number to 1,000 pizzas because someone has to sign off that they received 100 pizzas. And we're dealing with tax deductions here. So really learning that. Now it's about building in AI. How can we get a little bit better there? Impact data is really important. Sometimes it's not even about all what you build, but also how you show it. So how are you spending time with UX, UI developers? Or what are you looking at? Are you looking at Figmas every day on what this could look like from your customer to see it, to be able to see the vision? And then I also think our biggest piece of the product roadmap is talking to our customers all the time. I mean, we really were like, we'll give them gift cards if they complete surveys, if they'll meet with us. I mean, if we put an Amazon gift card on the table, we get 100% survey response. I don't know if anybody else tries that, but it helps us build to spec. And our product roadmap, I feel like I'm always kind of like, are we ever going to get to the end of the roadmap? I guess it's just a never-ending roadmap, right? Because you're always building, you're always, iterating and making new things. But for us, it is really about, are we making the impact? We put out our own impact report every single year. We measure down to the gallons of water that we save. We do a lot of tangible things to help people vision the data a little bit different. So we would tell people this equals this many cars off the road, this many trees planted, this is how many gallons of water that you've saved. You start showing people the data in that way, in an intuitive way, that they're like, wow, I'm really making a difference. Because of course with food waste, there's water waste. And so we start to help them see the bigger picture. The biggest piece for us was our community corner. And why that was so important is we wanted to create something that was downloadable. We're working with people that a lot of times are in the back of the house. If you've ever worked in the food service industry, they work in the kitchen. And early on, people thought there's no way that they're going to want to do this. They're not going to want to package the food and give it away. And I remember Gooder works with a lot of hospitals. We spent some time in the kitchen at the hospitals talking to the staff about doing this work and how easy it was. And one lady said to me, I'm so happy to be doing this. I have hated to throw this food away. There were too many nights when I even needed this food for my family. And we were then able to take that back to the hospital. They did a survey and learned that 40% of their food service workers and their environmental service workers, their janitors, were food insecure. Didn't even have access to food. Now we created a whole program where that food gets packaged and placed in a refrigerator in the same hospital in kind of a corner where nobody can really see it, where people can bring that food home. And that's the measurement that we put back into the customers. That was something that was a real tangible product improvement that we learned from people that were using the technology. And we helped a whole hospital system, and now we're helping a lot of hospitals, because if one hospital has the problem, right, everybody does. Now we're helping a lot of people understand that food insecurity is sometimes right underneath them.
Well, that's a great point, and I'm just wondering, what can we, right, as just the general public, what can we do to help fight food insecurity? How is it something that we can, what can we think about every day to help, help complete what your mission is as well?
Well, there's two things. I would say to think about food waste is a big piece, right? How do you encourage the cafeteria at your local corporation that you work at? Do you ask them what they do with their excess food? That's just the best thing, is just to have a question. Right now, Gooder is really advocating for policy that we want every business, when they get their food service license, we want them to have to just sign up to have a person that they would donate their excess food to. It doesn't have to be Gooder, it could be a local nonprofit, a senior facility, whomever. We want every business that has a food service license to have somebody that they will say, I'm gonna give my food to. We also want them to have somebody that they'll say they're going to donate the food or recycle the food with. Even if they don't do it, we want them to at least have to think about that and put something on paper that this is who I would donate the food to, or this is the program or the service that I would use. I tell people all the time to think about seniors. It's the number one fastest growing population of an individual is our seniors. So is there a senior facility that you live by? I send my grandmothers and my great aunt, this was a viral post on Twitter a couple days ago for me, but I send them food every weekend. And it's like what they look forward to. It costs me $20. They get together, they talk on the phone, they pick a restaurant, they've been trying Mexican, they love Mexican food, they just think it's the coolest thing. And I realized, I was like, you guys don't eat Mexican food? I mean, it was so interesting to me, but you know, my grandmother will be 90 in a couple of days. She's maybe had Mexican food a couple of times in her life, but now she's an avid lover, and she is asking me to try every Mexican restaurant in town. There's only 3. She lives in a very small town, so I'm like, you're out of it, you know, like, which one do you like? But that has been something that's been so tangible to me, is have you found somebody even close to you to make sure that they get access to food? Are you doing things in your community? Are you working at the food bank? Are you advocating? Today is World Hunger Day. I think it's amazing that World Food Day, excuse me. So it's amazing that I'm here talking about this. This is something that the United Nations created, I want to say about 14 years ago, and it really is about action around food waste, action around food insecurity. This is a problem that has not gone away. It just hasn't gone away. 1 in 8 people on the planet, 1 in 6 people in the country. It's insane. Children, seniors. So you could just start by doing anything small, and it's a really big deal. But for certain, on the food waste side, it doesn't just have to be your corporation. It is your local grocery store. What do you guys do with your food waste? What are your favorite restaurants doing with their food waste? How much food are you wasting at home? This is the reason why no one ever likes to go out to dinner with me. I get invited to no dinner parties because I always am asking. I mean, it's just kind of, they get so embarrassed, right? Like, oh God, eat all of my food. And, you know, they try and eat every little thing, but it's important. I meal shop as opposed to huddle shop is what I would say. I used to go grocery shopping and think, I'm going to fill my groceries. I'm grocery shopping for the next 2 weeks. I won't have to go to the grocery store. I would do that, and then I would go home and order food delivery. You know, like, so now it's very much like, hey, I'm going to make spaghetti tonight. I'm passing by the grocery store on my way home anyway. I go in and I get the items that I need to make that meal and kind of keep the staples in my house. Using your garbage disposal is something that a lot of people don't think about. There's a lot of things that you can actually dispose of in your garbage disposal that then doesn't go into landfill. So a lot of people don't use their garbage disposal enough. So those are just some of the things. I can continue to go on. The biggest food waste day of the year is coming up. Does anyone know what day that is? Thanksgiving. What's the second? Super Bowl Sunday. More chicken wings go to waste. More queso dip. I mean, because sometimes we always have to have enough. But what we realize is by having, we already do have enough, because so many people have nothing. So sometimes we don't need, and I was that person, and I think that's the funny thing, Adam. I was this person that was like, oh, I have to have a fried turkey, and I have to have a baked turkey, and I have to have a ham, and I have to have fried chicken. I mean, I was that person, and now I'm kind of like, what are people really going to eat? Like, what are we going to really do? Who's going to make what? How many people are coming? Really planning that menu out a little bit more. And if you're going to be the person that like freezes your food, then actually eat the food. Because what happens a lot, they find you freeze the food, you do all of this, and then you don't eat it. And then it's like you take it out 6 months later, and you're like, oh, do I really want this? Like, or first of all, what is this? Because it looks like a block of ice. And then ultimately you throw it away. So I think a lot of times it's about planning.
Interesting. Yeah. I think small changes all of us can easily make.
Small changes. Yeah.
So I think you mentioned a lot of very impressive data points during your presentation about the impact that Gooder's made. I'm interested to know, what's the future for Gooder? What's next? What are you guys really hoping to tackle? You have such an overarching mission, but what else are you hoping to be able to accomplish in the near future?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, we're working on two big things now. One is just expansion. So we are focusing on trying to raise a bit more capital to expand a bit further. There is legislation that's actually coming up, and this is really exciting because when I first started Gooder, one of the peculiar things that I saw is that in France and in Italy, it's actually illegal to throw away food. You will get fined up to 10,000 euro a day, which, I mean, the euro and the dollar changes often, but I'm thinking, let's say $12,000 a day US, right? It's a lot of money. So I can tell you that the grocery stores don't waste food because they have to donate it to an NGO, or they have to recycle it, or they're going to get fined. New states are starting to enact that right now. California and New York are two of the biggest states that are pushing forth this legislation. So we have been getting a lot of calls from them, and so we definitely are looking to expand there. We're also looking at food as medicine as a service on our hunger solution side. When people are coming to our grocery stores and they identify that they have high blood pressure or other existing conditions, can we help them with food that helps prevent those conditions and provide that for them? Our real big goals, we're trying to get to 100 million meals in 2 years. So it's it's taken us, I would say 7, but I will tell you this, we don't measure meals by pounds, and that's really different than how traditional food banks do. If I give you a 10-pound bag of onions, I don't give you 10 meals. Gooder measures meals by how many meals can you and your family go and eat. So if I was to measure it by pounds, I could easily stand up here and say we've provided over 100 million meals to people, but that's not how we do it. We measure it by your family came, you're a family of 4, we gave you a breakfast meat, a lunch meat, a dinner meat. You also had spaghetti noodles and spaghetti sauce and bread and salad and breakfast meals. And now we're seeing how many meals have we provided your family. So on average, families are leaving from Gooder with about 40 to 70 meals, depending. And so that's what we measure. So it's been a lot different. Now we want to get to 100 million in 2 years.
A more holistic way to measure
Yeah, it's
that.
definitely a more holistic way because you can't just measure it by pounds. We really look at the USDA My Plate rule, and are we giving people the grains, the vegetables, and the fruits, and the proteins? Like, what does that look like? So that's been a big piece for us too. So I think I want to just grow. I mean, I definitely want to get international. We have about 30,000 nonprofits that are registered in our platform in 17 countries, and we're only in 1. So there's a lot of nonprofits, transparently, that we're just not serving yet. And I want to figure that out. I get emails and phone calls all the time about franchising. Would you ever franchise the business? That's not the model that we've taken, but it's like, how do I feed more people and how do I do it faster?
Interesting. Well, so I think at this point it might be interesting to open it up to the audience if anybody has any questions. There we go. Cheryl, I see you over there.
All right, give me just a moment, Cheryl. I'm coming with the microphone. Can you pass that down to Cheryl for me? Thanks.
I am just in love with your work, and I look so much forward to looking at the Gooder model and how that's working. First, a commercial. If you are in the Western Maryland area and you're interested in this kind of work, I really suggest that you look into joining and working with the Western Maryland Food Council. I'm on their board. Shameless promotion here. We are looking at every aspect of the food system in the region, including food access, but also the food as medicine, the farmers and how they are growing their food, the environmental impacts of food and agriculture. And so if you are interested in that, we have a website, wmdfoodcouncil.com, or see me after. I'm happy to connect you. Maryland is also working on this. They created a couple years ago the Maryland Food System Resiliency Council to advise the state on where the food system is, where are the gaps, what can we do. And that started out as a temporary thing, but they're now a permanent department in Maryland Department of Emergency Management. So this work is continuing, and we're hoping that that includes funding for food councils to do this kind of work. And I'm married to a fresh produce farmer, and this is near and dear to my heart. So we sell at farmers markets. One market, there's no gleaning happening at the end of the market. But another market there's an organization in the town that has a little like free grocery store, as well as has like their own kitchen so that they make soup and whatever out of the food. But a lot of the local nonprofits don't have that infrastructure, and I'm wondering, do you work with those small nonprofits that you want the food to go to
Yeah.
to help them get refrigeration or get a way to stabilize the
do.
food?
Yeah, we created a foundation in 2020 in response to the pandemic, and part of the funding that we've been kind of raising from the foundation is going to just that, because even for a nonprofit to receive food from Gooder, I talked about that fear of liability that a lot of the customers have. So one of the processes to register to receive food from Gooder is you have to sign a hold harmless agreement that basically says you're not going to sell the food, you're not going to make someone work in exchange for the food, you're not going to hold Gooder or our partners liable, and that you're going to make sure that the food can be safely refrigerated. And what happens a lot of times is that's where we don't get the signature. Like when they have to check off all those boxes, that's the number one. So we have been doing things like when Dollar Generals and Family Dollars lately, at least in the South where we've been operating heavily, have been closing a lot. They used to operate across the street from each other. How do we get those refrigerators? Like if they're not going to sell them, can we get them to nonprofits? Whenever businesses sell, like we kind of are like scavengers in a way, like trying to get refrigerators and cooling systems. We just recently had like an ice cream company that went out of business, and they had a lot of ice cream freezers. We were able to get those matched with several different nonprofits because they weren't operating in a storefront. They just needed to be able to keep things cold. That was like the biggest piece. I also believe that there is some grants that are through, I think it's called Give 360, and Amazon is starting to do a lot of this work as well, because keep in mind, we're on the food side of the business. You guys have to understand that waste happens with everything. Food is at the top, but then next you get into clothing waste, and you're starting to see a lot of that ThredUp and Queen of Raw, these people trying to recycle clothing, because that's huge. I can't tell you how many, has anyone ever seen the dumpster diving videos? I get like 10 of these a day on my Instagram, so it's just a big thing. But everything gets thrown away. Bath and Body Works, they're not gonna sell this anymore, they just put it in a trash can. What does it look like to get that to an organization? Would a senior home not love to get Bath and Body Works? Nothing's wrong with it. It's just we're not going to sell candy apple Christmas, and so it's just going in the trash. So this waste is happening, and it's so critical that we start to figure out ways to solve it, because it's just not healthy for any of us. So we are looking at that, and I'm glad to hear that Maryland is building an alliance, because as I drove here today, I thought to myself, I'm driving through a lot of food deserts, and I know it just because I understand rural communities. I know what food deserts look like. A lot of places, people are driving 30 to 40 minutes one way to get access to a grocery store. Can you imagine if you get home and you forget the butter? And now you're 40 minutes, no butter that week. It's just literally, they say that 1 in 5 people live in a food desert, which is really insane. And a lot of times, even if they're living inner city, they're still living in a food desert if the only grocery store that they can go to is a corner store. And it's, and a lot of grocery store or gas stations are calling themselves like Ben's Food Mart, and they sell nothing fresh. There's no meat, there's nothing, but if you Google, it's called Ben's Food Mart. It's not real food. It's actually a gas station. It should be called like Ben's Snack Mart. But what happens is they get listed as grocery stores. So we're actually doing a healthy corner store initiative right now in Gooder, where we're bringing in fresh produce and then getting it delivered to gas stations in these communities where we know people are coming in using their SNAP benefits, paying sometimes $9 for a gallon of milk. So the gas stations are way overcharging them. But if they don't have a car, and this is the only place that they can get milk, and their kid needs cereal tomorrow for breakfast, what happens with that is then they deplete their SNAP benefits a lot faster. Then they end up running out, they don't have enough food, and it creates just this really vicious cycle. So I always tell people what I look to solve for is I want to solve on the other end of the box, the other end of the plate. Like, I want to solve for the person that's hungry and how they receive. I want to change that. I want it to be more about, hey, are you allergic to this? Are you vegan? Are there vegans in the household? Do you have the items that you need? You may have never seen an eggplant. Let me give you this eggplant Parmesan recipe. That's what we build in our technology. It says, hey, Adam, thanks for stopping at the Gooder pop-up today. One of the items you received was spinach. Here's a recipe for a spinach and strawberry salad. Tag us in your picture if you make this on Instagram. And you'd be surprised how many people do that.
Great, thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us. your work is very impactful. I wanted to ask, what are the biggest or the hardest impacts or the biggest roadblocks in your work? Is it the governmental side? Is it the social, I guess, awareness, or social conceptions of things like houselessness and food insecurity? Just expound a little
I
more.
definitely think the policy hasn't advanced to the level that I had hoped it would. You know, when I was looking at this in 2016 and seeing like, oh, it's illegal in France, it's illegal in Italy, I thought, oh, it's gonna come to America one day and it's gonna be illegal here. And obviously the policy just isn't there yet. I think that's just a detriment because we can't always force people to do what's right, you know, but sometimes it's like you have to do what's right. Like, and I think I would love for that to be like an opportunity to speed up what we do, because the work is real, and we're able to show like, hey, this company just donated 700 meals in 5 minutes, and we got it to the Atlanta mission, and it went to 600 men that are going to eat breakfast and dinner today. Like that, I mean, the reality of it is so real and so tangible. I think the bubbles that I mentioned have always been an impediment as well, because sometimes it's hard if you're not doing blockchain, if you're not doing NFTs, if you're not doing AI, it's not kind of like the exciting thing a lot of times as it relates to like funding and where kind of everything leans. So that's definitely been a challenge. I would say the biggest challenge for me is just never feeling like I've been able to do enough, because the reality is so many people are still in need, and that's tough. You know, you create a business to solve a problem, and if that problem just continues to fester, it's kind of like I often feel like, am I doing enough? I never feel like I'm doing enough, because there's still so many people that are experiencing hunger, and I want to solve it. So I think that's ultimately what keeps me up at night.
I will say, as a follow-up, I do think that you've brought a lot of dignity to the, I guess, charity and need process. A lot of times, as far as what I've heard or what I've experienced, a lot of it is feeling not like, oh, I'm just a person and you're just throwing this to me. I'm getting secondhand things. I'm getting the leftovers, and just having fancy dinners just for these people makes them feel special, makes them feel more dignified, more human than I feel like they've felt in a very long time. I think it's very important that we still keep the human part of these people, not just look at them as charity cases and so sad, but also as people with experiences and feelings and wanting to feel important or cared for.
Yeah. Or even just, I think, you know, I tell my daughter all the time, I have an older daughter as well, but I'm like, you got to treat people. I think we all learned this in kindergarten, treat people how you want to be treated. And that's kind of the big opportunity. And you said something that was so unique, because that was one of the big things that happened with Gooder. A lot of times when you build, you solve for other things and you didn't know. When our first big customer was the Time Warner Turner Broadcasting Company. And so this is like TNT, and the secretary reached out to me and she was like, listen, we waste so much food. You know, this is like, I'm a big sports fan. So like, you know, Shaq and everybody, I go in, I see the thing, I'm like FaceTiming, taking pictures like that. Oh my God, I'm sitting here in the TNT studios, and you go back and there was all this food, and it's really, really good food. That's the thing that I thought is so crazy. You know, this is, you know, the CEO that works there every day is making $8-10 million a year, right? So he's not eating bad food. And what would happen is when I would take it to the homeless shelter, and I did this for the first year of Gooder, I was like an employee of one, so I was very involved in every process. And I remember this guy was coming through the buffet line at the shelter, and it was like a lemon Parmesan asparagus, and he says to the chef, oh, you trying to kill me? And the chef was like, oh, no, it's just asparagus. And he had never seen it before. It just was so like, he literally didn't know what he was eating. And so it was one of those things of, and me and the chef had a big conversation. He was like, Jasmine, you'd really be surprised how many people haven't seen vegetables outside of a can. And I never thought about that, because, you know, when we go to the grocery stores, I think a lot of times in this work, I've realized how privileged we all are. And I could speak to all of us. If we get an opportunity to go into a grocery store and see fresh produce and get to pick it out, there is a world of people who've never got that experience. And so to hear that and see that being also a ripple effect of our work has been really exciting.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Over there,
Over
Autumn.
here. All right.
I'm in here.
My name is Chris. First, I want to say thank you for your work. I was born in Congo, where there's a lot of famine, and I moved to United States, and I noticed that they do actually waste a lot of food, and I was quite upset about it, but it was because I could not done anything to change it. So it's good to see that there's some people working on trying to solve the waste of food in the United States. Now, my question is more on focus on business. How do you go find those investors, and what's the process of it?
Oh, that's a great question. So our business model is we see ourselves as a waste management company. In a sense, the businesses, as I said, they're already paying to throw the food away, but they're paying another waste provider. And so we package ourselves as a sustainable waste company. We provide them all the packaging materials and labels for the food to go in, just as a waste company provides them the trash bin. We inventory everything it is that they sell, so it's very easy. They can upload an Excel spreadsheet of their menu. We're working now with AI where they can take a picture of the menu, and now it'll just automatically kind of transcribe it. And, you know, because different corporate campuses will have different menus every day. And so their menus are constantly changing. They could click on the items very quickly, request a pickup, we get it delivered. So our business model is volume-based fee for service, just like a traditional waste company. However, we have a software subscription fee per user, per location. So on a low end, maybe a customer is spending $5,000 a year with Gooder. Not a lot, right? Maybe they get 2 or 3 pickups a month that go into a back of someone's car. But what is unique about us is that on average, everyone that works with Gooder on our surplus food recovery sees about a 4x to 10x ROI, meaning if they pay Gooder $200 for a pickup, they are traditionally donating, let's say, between $800 and $2,000 worth of food, and that they get that back in a tax deduction. So that's the biggest difference. I would say dollar for dollar, we're usually more expensive than what a waste company will charge, but the benefit is greater. So when you look at, hey, the waste company also is gonna just take it to landfill, you're gonna get no insights back on like what's going to waste the most. We've been able to help businesses maybe stop ordering things that constantly went to waste. I remember Einstein's Bagels was one of our first customers, and they have a brand standard of fresh bagels every 30 minutes. But what we were able to tell Einstein's after about a month of working with them is like, listen, for whatever reason, nobody likes these blueberry bagels. Like, stop it, because it's at the end of the day, that's the number one thing that everybody like. But the bagel that we have the least wasted of was the everything bagel. Being able to show them that, so if they're going to continue to, if you want your fresh bagel, right? I'm not telling Einstein's to change their brand standard, but I am telling them to not continually make something that nobody is buying. And so what we find out is a lot of times they are able to make better insights on the source reduction of the food. So it's about like the analytics, it's about the data. So it is so that's where that software subscription fee is so unique, because we can look at it and say like, oh God, their number one most wasted thing is the blueberry bagel. They don't need to make as many blueberry bagels. And now they get onto our platform and they get an alert like, as a reminder, Adam, less blueberry bagels today. Like, like that's kind of their reality. So we're able to teach them a lot about just that source reduction. And that's been incredible. One of our first customers, Turner, I use them as an example again, they saw pork. And I mean, they saw that their number one most wasted item was pork. And what we figured out is at the time, it was a diet shift. A lot more people were going vegan. A lot more people were going plant-based diets. They were giving up pork if they were going to give up any meats. And so we were able to kind of help the chef see that he was making things that strictly just were going to waste. And nobody likes to purely throw away money. I'll tell you one other thing, because I know you guys, I'm standing in between somebody winning an iPad, which I'm really jealous of. But one of the things I would say is a lot of people used to think, specifically investors, you're going to work yourself out of business, because you're giving you're showing them what they're wasting the most of, so that they could ultimately stop wasting and stop producing so much. What I can say now, almost 8 years in business, is there is always waste. It doesn't matter what. Like it does, if you sell 500 tickets, 100 people may not show up. And so that no matter what you've thought to do, the waste is always existing. It's inevitable. At the airport, Atlanta Airport's one of our biggest customers. I can't tell you how many days they'll say like, hey, we're expecting 100,000 people in the airport tomorrow. So, get there early. It's the worst. I love Atlanta's airport, but it's a tough one. But, I'm pretty sure if anyone's ever traveled Delta through, you've been through it, it's a lot. But what will happen is if flights are late, and now it's like you get off the plane, and so the airport staff has been told, like we've been told, like, hey, 100,000 passengers are coming through today, everything gets prepared. What happens is, Adam, your flight comes in late, you don't have time to stop and get any food, you're running to your gate out of breath like me, and then you get to the gate, and what happens is all this food that the airport prepared is in excess. And FAA regulations, they have to throw it away every 12 hours. So the amount of food that we get out of the airport on a nightly basis is insane.
All right. Well, I think we have time for maybe one more question, Autumn. Is
Sure,
that
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anybody else want to ask Jasmine? There we go.
All right.
All right. Wonderful.
Got a little different topic. I'm interested in your children's book. Is it food waste based or is it totally unrelated?
It's called Everybody Eats, and it's food waste and hunger based. And so the premise of it is a young girl's volunteering at a food bank with her family one Saturday morning, giving away food, and sees one of her friends from school with her father in line, and kind of was like, oh, well, what are you doing here? And just is kind of blown away that she has a friend that's going hungry. So it's really based off of my friend's story that I spoke about, but kind of in a kid's book realm. And so then she goes on a whole crusade to like get the grocery store to give her food and the school to not waste food, and she learns about food waste and saves the day.
And where can we find that?
It's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon?
Yep.
All right.
You know where
But
else
I
you
could
can find
definitely get
it? You know where
Autumn's
else you can find it? In one of our Tech at the Gap gift baskets today.
Oh, look at
Yeah.
that.
Well,
So
isn't that a
exciting.
wonderful segue, Autumn? Thank you for setting it up like that. Well,
I did not plant that question. No.
That is,
no.
I didn't even know that, Adam. That's even more, that's amazing. Well, first of all, I just want to say, guys, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to the story of Gooder. And I want to thank Autumn and the team, Adam, for putting this together. The biggest thing I always will leave you guys with is this. I knew nothing about technology. I had never ran a company a day in my life. I had never raised $1 a day in my life. I just wanted to feed people. I sat down with a pen and paper. You saw my logo. It was terrible. You should have seen the wire screens. I never will show those because you will never hold it against me. But the wireframes were even worse than my logos. And I just started writing on it and just started working on it. So as my grandmother always says, plan your work and then work your plan. Thank you guys so much.